Yeah, social media has had a huge impact, I think, on Gen Z's identity. And they can't really help it because they haven't known anything other than that in their lifetimes. Unlike me, who grew up without a computer in my home or a cell phone of my own, or any kind of access to something like that. But now, young adults have the ability to kind of shape their identity according to what they want to put out there on social media. So I think very much so the identity of young people now is shaped by what they want people to see or what they think people want to see from them. Makes it pretty easy to hide behind kind of a screen all the time and only show the best side. So for example, you don't see a lot of bedhead selfies or people's weak moments. They only really put forth the good stuff. Somebody like me suffers like that because I'm a mom, and when I see other moms only putting forward like great pictures of their perfectly behaved kids, I tend to fall into the same kind of traps that young people do, which I think young people now are driven toward this idea of perfectionism, but also this idea of comparison, and they both are kind of in the same area. Perfectionism in that they don't want anyone to see their flaws. So in social media, like the pictures that you see, the moments that you see, it's almost as if it's all staged. That everything can be kind of edited, and even photographs and words. So the idea that what I put out there has to be perfect, therefore I have to be perfect all the time. So when I leave my house, I want to match the image of myself that I've put out there. But also comparison, because on social media, inevitably, you're seeing everyone else's perfect image of themselves. And so you end up falling into the trap, oh, well, she's got, this kind of look about her, this way about her, or he's got this grasp of words, or, whatever. I should be more like that. I want to be more like her or like him. So we end up in this constant state of comparison. And I think what that does to the individual is they tend to begin to either overestimate their abilities or underestimate. So it messes with pride. And I think pride is at the root of the sin that we tend to fall into because of social media. So I've heard Tim Keller, it's one of my favorite pastors, and I've learned a lot from him. And one of my favorite teachings that he does is called the freedom of self-forgetfulness. And in that teaching, he's drawing from Paul in 1 Corinthians chapters 3 and 4, where Paul is addressing the Corinthian church where they are comparing themselves to one another because, some received the gospel message from Paul and some received the gospel from Apollo. And so they're trying to one-up each other all the time and knock the other down so that they themselves can feel superior. And Paul attacks it. He says, you've got to stop this. This is pride. Clearly, I'm paraphrasing. But what he goes on to tell them is, listen, I'm telling you you're wrong, and I don't care what you think about me for doing that. Now, that would have been shocking to them because they lived in a time and place where people's identities or value was very much determined by the society. It was a shame culture in Greco-Roman society. So, what you thought of yourself was really determined by how others saw you. And so when Paul says, I don't care if you judge me, that was shocking to them. But then he went on and he said something even more shocking, which was, in fact, I don't even care what I think about myself. That was a game changer for them. What he goes on to say is, I only care what is most true, and that is what Christ thinks of me. And Christ, who had saved Paul, certainly, he sees his church as pure and without blemish because he has made them so. So when we walk around believing anything other than that, we tend to have egos that are not working in the way they're supposed to. So Keller went on to teach, we don't wake up in the morning going, oh man, my elbows are awesome. I love my elbows, God, and giving praise for them, unless your elbow is injured, in which case that's all you can pay attention to. When they're doing what they're supposed to do, we don't really pay attention to them at all because they're operating as they should. Our egos are like that. So your ego can be overinflated or it can be underinflated, which I think is what social media tends to cause, one way or the other. Either way, that is a damaged ego, and it's all we can pay attention to. So essentially, we turn our attention inward to ourselves. The freedom of self-forgetfulness is that when our ego is operating as it should, when we're walking in a gospel humility, C.S. Lewis said it's not thinking more of yourself or thinking less of yourself. It's simply thinking of yourself less. When we're operating in that way, we become much more free to be curious about the world. So I think that that's a big challenge that Gen Z has because of the technology they have available to them. Certainly not opposed to that technology. There's potential for great good with it, but that's one of the many things that you have to be careful of in the way that it shapes your identity.
I think I had almost more of a secular worldview than I originally thought I did. And so things like abortion and same-sex marriage, I had a lot of wishy-washy views on that kind of stuff. And Summit really helped reframe and sturdy those views to something that actually forms the Christian worldview that I thought I believed my whole life.
There's so many people who don't know the gospel. And so just learning these different worldviews is so important so that we have a bigger, I guess, chance to witness to a bigger variety of people.
Like, I think it's so hard to find truth and to be able to sit down and sort out like biblical truth because the world is just so noisy.
We have so many voices. We have the internet, we have media, we're in school, we're constantly being fed so much information.
Oftentimes when you step into the culture, because it's so pervasive and you're in this bubble of secular people, you start to drift into doing what everyone else is doing and saying, well, I know Christianity is true, but maybe I can just kind of compromise here and there and I'll be okay.
The culture is asking all the right questions, but sometimes coming up with really shallow answers.
Knowing what you believe is getting increasingly more important because you're gonna be challenged and because you're gonna be pushed down. If we're gonna love each other, we also have to show them the truth in a loving way. And so we have to be ready because there's so many different things that we didn't even see 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that would even be a thing. This is preparing us for the world that we live in now.
Coming to Summit, it really shaped my worldview entirely because like I kind of knew what was out there and it was like, okay, I know what I believe, but I had no clue what other people believed. Maybe I knew like bits and pieces, but like coming here and hearing like the Marxist worldview and like postmodernism and new spirituality, it was like, whoa. Like it really just like shaped my whole way of viewing the world. Like maybe you're watching a movie or you're talking to someone and you're like, oh my goodness, that's a worldview. And that's a worldview. It really just changed my life entirely.
The Christian worldview is about how to live out that life for the glory of God and for the good of your neighbors. Amen.